so happy to be with you, and I feel like Nina's already given the address that I should have given today, but I will go ahead with the one I've already written out, being a writer that's written out. So, greetings again to everyone who's already been greeted numerous times, especially to the parents we sent forth through college, so I know what you're feeling today. Besides an enormous pride, it's an enormous sense of relief. As you know, I'm a writer for children, and I get a lot of letters from children. Now, it's nice, as Grace Potter surely knows, to hear from your fans, but the letters I get are not all great letters. For example, Dear Catherine Patterson, my teacher said we had to write a letter to an author, so I thought I might as well write to you. Or, Dear Mrs. Patterson, you're the best writer in the world. Someday I'm going to read one of your books. Or, Dear Catherine Patterson, I did not like the ending of your book. Here is my idea of how you should end it better. I hope you will take my suggestion. But then there are those letters you want to remember. And one came from a young girl who said, I liked your book, Bridge to Terabithia, because you stick to reality and a dream. When I was thinking about what I should say today, I remembered those words, stick to reality and a dream. Because they don't they exactly describe the wonderful college that you are graduating from today. When my husband and I moved to Vermont 30 years ago, Champlain was a small 2-year college known mostly as a business school, across the street from and in the shadow of a much larger, better-known institution that today shall remain nameless. I am particularly thrilled to be receiving this honor today because, like many people in Vermont, I have watched the utter transformation of Champlain College with admiration and amazement. What was the secret behind this transformation? How did this small junior college become, in the words of the U.S. News and World Reports, the #1 most innovative school of regional colleges in the North? And I happened to be speaking to a woman whose job it is to go around the country and evaluate colleges and universities. And she said that Champlain College is one of the most exciting schools in the United States. And it's true. I'm a writer, so I always want to know the story. And I think my hint came from the change that was made in 2009 that has already been mentioned today. At that time, the motto of Champlain College was Suum Cuique. Now, my high school Latin is a bit rusty after all these years, but it means something like, you get what you deserve. I suppose it was meant as a challenge to the students to study hard, and it would pay off eventually. But in 2009, it seems a committee of faculty, staff, and students felt that this motto no longer expressed their vision for the school and came up with your current motto, Audeamus, let us dare. A few short years ago, the people who cared about this school laid out an audacious vision for what Champlain College could be, and together, and that is the key word, together, you are daring to fulfill it. sticking, as my young friend said, to reality and a dream, while not getting either stuck in the old reality or wandering off into wishful thinking. Throughout your studies here, whether on campus or online, you graduates have lived out that vision. You have shared in that spirit of daring. But what happens tomorrow and the next day and the next year? What happens when you leave this beautiful, supportive community and find yourself in a world torn by conflict and riddled with fear? A situation exacerbated by a political climate such as I've never seen before in my long life. I'd like to share with you a story that I've retold many times because it has been such an inspiration to me. About 35 years ago, we were living 4 blocks from Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. Maya Angelou was slated to speak as part of the University Literary Festival. And I went over early to make sure I got a good seat, in which proved to be a packed house. As it turned out, I had the perfect seat, 3rd row center. Ms. Angelou, as you may know, was at least 6 feet tall. That night, she was wearing a full-length African dress, and she had a scarf wrapped around her head that went up into the air and added at least another foot, or maybe a foot and a half, to her height. She gave, you won't be surprised to know, an eloquent presentation, weaving stories of her own difficult life through readings from her prose and poetry. The evening concluded with questions from the audience, in the course of which Miss Angelou recognized a young woman who was sitting about 2 seats to my right. "Miss Angelou," she said, "could you tell us how hard it was to get published when you were not only Black, but a woman?" Mrs. Angelou, all 7 feet of her, leaned so far over from the stage that her face was nearly in the face of her questioner. "Darling," she said, "don't whine." Don't whine. You lose grace when you whine. I was very happy not to be that red-faced young woman. But I might have been. You may be surprised to hear it, but I have been known to whine, especially in this election cycle. And it seems to me realistically that there's plenty to whine about these days, especially if you're young and about to graduate. Many of you, thanks to this great school, already have a great job lined up. But I'm guessing a few of you don't. Then there's the economy in general, the greed of the 1%, global warming, which you never created but will have to live with the consequences of. Politics, whether you lean left or right, nobody seems to be doing it properly. And that college loan, how in the world will that ever get paid off? And we haven't even mentioned ISIS or earthquakes, nuclear weapons in North Korea, or hundreds and thousands of homeless refugees. Today, you're celebrating, but tomorrow, come on now, who in their right minds won't feel like whining? And then I think of former President Jimmy Carter. He entered the White House daring to hope that an honest man can make a real difference in the world. Everything went wrong during those 4 years, from the severe gasoline shortage to the Iranian hostage crisis. He left Washington after what was universally labeled a failed presidency. He was the laughingstock of the media, this pious little peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia. But Jimmy Carter didn't whine. He was realistic, all right, but he still had a dream of what the world might be. He was still daring enough to believe that he could make a difference. I read a statement last week from a former media critic who said, "He may not have been a great president, but perhaps he was the greatest man to be president." The Carter Center, which is his post-presidential endeavor, has made it its mission to work for peace and healing of the world. Just one of its goals over the last 30 years has been to rid the world of the guinea worm. The guinea worm, which you may not know about, which I didn't before I read this, the guinea worm is a particularly horrible parasite that for thousands of years has killed and maimed millions of people in Africa and in the Near and Far East. There's mention of the guinea worm in 2,000-year-old records found in Egypt. In 1986, when the Carter Center took on the fight against this terrible scourge, there were reported 3.5 million cases of guinea worm infection in 20 countries. This past February, 30 years later, there were 22 cases confined to a village in South Sudan. At his news conference announcing his brain cancer diagnosis a few years ago, President Carter was asked what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. He said he wasn't afraid to die, but he did want to live longer than the guinea worm. And friends, at last count, the 92-year-old Carter is slated to outlive the several thousand-year-old guinea worm. So you can whine that the world has treated you unfairly, or you can dare to make a difference, as some of you already are daring, as we've heard from both Nina and President Lackman. Or you can dare to make a difference. That takes daring, and that takes courage. That night in Norfolk, Maya Angelou said that courage is the most important of all of the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. I love the broad vision of this college. You may be better known for sticking to reality with the very practical goal of preparing students for real jobs. But your dream is much broader than job training. You've been challenged to embrace diversity, to open your eyes and hearts to a vision that is global and compassionate. Champlain College has asked you to dare to look beyond your own race and religion and zip code and embrace all human beings as your neighbors, and to care for this tiny planet, which is our shared home. Jimmy Carter set to outlive the guinea worm. I want to live long enough to see the class of 2016 take the skills and knowledge you have acquired and the vision you have shared here in this wonderful school and go out and change the world. Audialis.